What is the stupidest thing you've done just to show you could do it? Back in 2001, I was working at this pub called the King's Head, pulling pints and wiping down tables for barely above minimum wage. It was one of those proper British pubs with sticky floors, regulars who'd been drinking there since the Stone Age, and a jukebox that only played songs from 1985. My sister Emma had just started working at this phone shop in town and was constantly going on about all the latest mobile technology. This was back when having a phone that could send text messages made you feel like you were living in the future. She'd managed to get me this tiny Sony phone with her employee discount, a proper little flip phone that made me feel like I was in The Matrix or something. The thing was genuinely impressive for its time. It was about the size of a matchbox when folded up, had this satisfying snap when you flipped it open, and the battery lasted forever. But the real selling point, according to the box and Emma's enthusiastic sales pitch, was that it was completely waterproof. Not water resistant, not splash-proof, waterproof. The box had pictures of the phone sitting at the bottom of a fish tank looking perfectly fine. I'd been showing it off to everyone who'd listen. The thing had these tiny rubber seals around all the joints and connection points, and when you pressed them down, they felt properly watertight. Emma had told me some story about how Sony had tested these phones by dunking them in water for hours at a time. I was absolutely convinced I was carrying around a piece of indestructible technology. So there I was on a Tuesday night, working my shift when this conversation started up at the bar. It was pretty quiet, just the usual crowd of locals nursing their pints and complaining about football. I was polishing glasses when my phone rang, and I made a big show of answering it right there at the bar. When I hung up, this regular named Dave started asking about the phone. Dave was one of those guys who thought he knew everything about everything. The kind of bloke who'd argue with you about the weather while standing in the rain. That's a fancy bit of kit, he said, picking up his pint. What's special about it then? I launched into my whole spiel about how advanced it was, mentioning the waterproof feature like it was the most natural thing in the world. Dave immediately started shaking his head. Nah, mate, that's bollocks. No phone is properly waterproof. Shower resistant maybe, or splash proof, but you drop that thing in water and it's done for. This one's different, I insisted, pulling out the box from behind the bar where I'd stashed it. Look, it says right here, waterproof, not water resistant, waterproof. Dave squinted at the box with the skepticism of a man who'd been disappointed by marketing claims his entire life. Marketing garbage, that is. They all say stuff like that. A few other regulars had drifted over by this point, sensing an argument brewing. There's nothing pub regulars love more than a good debate, especially when someone's about to make an idiot of themselves. I'm telling you, this phone is properly waterproof, I said, getting more defensive. My sister works in the shop. She knows what she's talking about. All right then, Dave said, setting down his pint with a thud. If you're so confident, prove it. Now, any reasonable person would have walked away at this point. Maybe suggested we test it with a glass of water first or look up the specifications online. But I was 22, full of misplaced confidence, and absolutely certain that I was right. Without even thinking about it, I grabbed my phone and dropped it straight into Dave's pint of bitter. The entire bar went silent. Even the jukebox seemed to pause mid-song. We all stared at my phone sitting at the bottom of the glass, surrounded by amber liquid and foam. After about 10 seconds, the screen flickered once and went completely black. Dave slowly picked up his pint, fished out my phone with 2 fingers, and set it on a bar towel. Well, he said, I reckon I need a fresh pint. The phone was completely dead. No amount of rice, hairdryers, or desperate button pressing could bring it back to life. Emma was absolutely livid when I had to explain why I needed another phone so soon. She made me pay full price for the replacement, and never let me forget about the time I murdered a perfectly good mobile to win a pub argument. 23 years later, I still think about that moment whenever I'm about to do something stupid just to prove a point. Sometimes being wrong is expensive, but it's always educational.